To build a second phase of the project, for which we have configured the billing limits, let's navigate to our project. On the Form toolbar, click Run Project Billing. The system now creates a Proforma invoice and takes us to the Proforma invoice screen. In the summary area of this screen, next to the Over Limit Total box, notice that we have a warning that shows that the billing limit has been exceeded. If we had to release the Proforma invoice, even though it exceeded the billing limit, the system would allow us to release it because Ignore has been selected as the Validate Time and Material Revenue Budget Limits value on the Project Preferences form. On the Time and Material tab, notice that in the Max Limit Amount column, the system shows the limit amount defined for the pair of the project task and item. We configured billing limits for only one revenue budget line. This limit is applied to only Proforma invoice lines with the 20 project task and the training item. The max available amount is the amount available to bill the line. The amount is a running total that the system calculates for each line from the topmost one. The amount is calculated as the difference between the max available amount and the amount to invoice of the previous line. For the first line, the max available amount is 500, which is the max limit amount. The over limit amount is 0 because the amount to invoice is less than the max available amount. For the second line, to which the system applies the billing limit, the max available amount is 300, which is the difference between the max available amount and the amount to invoice of the first line. The over limit amount is still 0 because the amount to invoice is also less than the max available amount. For the third line to which the system applies the billing limit, the max available amount is 100, which is the difference between the max available amount and the amount to invoice of the second line. The over limit amount is 300, which is the difference between the amount to invoice and the max available amount. If we now drag this line to which the system applies the billing limit and place it above the third line, we notice that the system has recalculated the max available amount and over limit amount of the lines. If we had to change the amount to invoice from 400 to 350 for this line, the system changes the status of the line to Hold Remainder. This means we are going to partially bill this line with the amount to invoice less than the billed amount. By default, the amount of the difference between the billed amount and the amount to invoice of the line is postponed until the next billing. Let's now select Write Off as the status for this line. With this status, this line will not be copied to the accounts receivable invoice that is created based on this Proforma invoice when the Proforma invoice is released. The system writes off the amount to invoice and will not add this amount to any future Proforma invoices for the project. We will delete the line with the site review item. The system will now add this deleted line to the Proforma invoice during the next billing. Notice that the over limit total of the invoice is still 50. Let's now add an adjustment line. We select our project task, insert our inventory as training, and update the amount to invoice as -50. Let's save our changes now. If we now move the adjustment line we created before this line, notice that the over limit total of the invoice is now 0. In the summary area, we can now clear the Hold checkbox and release the Proforma invoice. On the Form toolbar, notice that the system shows an error that says that the Proforma invoices of the project should be released in sequence in which they were created. In addition to this Proforma invoice, the project has the Proforma invoice that we created in the previous videos for the time and material projects that we have not yet released. You cannot release the invoice we created in this video before we release the previously created one. Let's put our Proforma invoice back on hold, and for demonstration purposes, I will now delete this Proforma invoice. We have now created a Proforma invoice with billing limits applied and have edited the invoice to fit the limits. We deleted the Proforma invoice because in the next video we will modify the billing rule and generate a Proforma invoice for the project again.